Today, I'm super excited to be collaborating with Rebecca from Paper Crafting with Rebecca, and we will both be creating a card based on these parameters, which we've called the Springy Card Challenge. And we invite you to participate along as well if you like, using the hashtag Springy Card Challenge. Hello and welcome. I'm Steph from Chaos in the Craft Room, and I'm so glad you're joining Rebecca and I today. If you're not familiar with Rebecca's channel, I highly recommend you go check her out. And I'm giving you a bit of a sneak peek preview of one of the cards that I will be creating today with these parameters. But Rebecca has some great tips and tricks as well, so I'll have a link to Rebecca's channel at the end of my video. And also, I'll have a link to her channel in my description box below, so you can find out what she's created with these parameters. So the very first parameter is using a stencils on our card. So I've picked out a few of my favorite stencils, and I'll have a list of the craft supplies that I'm using in this video in my description box below. And I've decided to use some thick white texture paste on my stencil today and just put it in certain sections, and that way we're adding a bit of extra texture to the card base, and also provide a few areas where we put ink over the top, it will slightly resist in those areas as well. So it will add a bit of extra color and shading to our card as well. So the next day, I've pulled out my Distress Stain inks. Now, this is Old Paper and Walnut Stain, and I've actually decanted them from the little daubers, but I've decanted them into spray bottles because I prefer using them as sprays. These other two sprays are just random inks that I found in a secondhand shop, and I've just poured them into spray bottles, because really crafting is all about using what you have, and I think there really is no limitations on what you can create with the supplies that you have. It's all about your creativity. And before I start spraying, I always pull out my messy box, I call it, and that's where you can see here it's a mess in here as is, but I can spray anything or use embossing powders in here and make a mess and not have to worry about cleaning it up. So all I'm doing is I've got one spray bottle filled with water, and then my other sprays are my inks. And all I'm doing is I'm randomly spraying in different sections the colored inks, and then spraying over the top with a little bit of water just to help it move in different directions on the page. And so I don't have the spray droplets, but more the colored ink. And then using some paper towel to dab off any extra. And if you want to make the ink move in a certain direction, I just lift up the paper and let the ink flow down the page through the texture paste. And some colors blend really nicely, or if you're using like the brown, I usually like letting the color dry first and then adding the brown later once it's dry, so you don't get a muddy look. Okay, so these are how they look once they've dried the next day. So I've used the texture paste and just sprayed some spray over the top. So such an easy, simple technique, but look how interesting these look. So that ticks off stencils and ink blending, because really the ink blending's done for us here. And while you're going, you may as well create a couple. Just make sure that you're using the right type of paper that can hold that much water, so either thick cardstock or a watercolor based cardstock. The next parameter I'm going to tackle is pattern paper. I don't often use pattern paper unless it's for something like Kendra's card challenge, or I'm using just pattern paper, but I usually don't do a mix of pattern paper and ink blending. So I thought it'd be fun to use this pattern paper using the Cuttlebug Quilled Rose Carnation Kit. And depending how many you layer on top of each other, depends how full the flower looks. For today's cards, I've decided to go with 3 layers. So I first add double-sided tape at the base of each layer, and I'm going to go in with some black ink just to create a bit more depth on the edge of the petals. Then once I've done that to each layer, it's time to assemble them. So I take the double-sided tape off the first one and add the second layer slightly offset on top of that. And then I do that again for the third layer. So you can see here, they are very clearly offset to one another, and that's what gives a nice full look of the flower. And the final double-sided tape is to hold the flower together as we roll it up. And then to create the flower, all you do is you pull down the petals one by one on the edge, making sure you're not pulling the ones that are overlapped. So as you don't want to rip the paper, but the ones that have no overlap. And then you just work your way around until all the petals are down. And now normally you'd use a quilling tool for this to get a really tight center. But because for today's challenge we need to use yarn, I was thinking of putting some yarn in the center somehow of the flower. I haven't quite decided how at this point. And I've created a whole heap in a range of different colors. So that ticks off pattern paper, and my next parameter I'm going to work on is new. So my newest item, and I have quite a lot of new items at the moment. So one thing I've recently got is these Pearlized card and envelope packs, which I normally don't get, but I thought they would come in handy once if I need a quick way to finish off a card. And I thought it could be a really nice border for these cards with that beautiful black pearlized background. And I've also got 2 new stamp and die sets. So one's the Close to My Heart Springtime Borders stamp set of the month. And the other one is actually a really old one, but I just happened to find it in a secondhand shop. And it hasn't been used yet. And that is the Stampin' Up! Special Reason. I just love the leaf dies in this set, and I thought it would look perfect to use on my cards with some pattern paper. And the final thing I've got is actually a present my sister got me, and that's these really cute wooden flourish packs from Craft. And I was thinking I might be able to use these to add, to embellish my card at the very end. So I've die cut some of this paper, which has a glossy element to it, which is another parameter. I'm not sure if I'm going to make this one count or if I'm going to add something else, as I feel like maybe it's cheating, or maybe I get double points if I add both 2 lots of glossiness to the card. Now, to use the Close to My Heart stamp set, I was thinking we could do some light stamping in the background. I love the hearts, and I didn't want to use it as a border, just some random stamping around the card. However, I've gone in a little bit too heavy-handed with this stamp, so I wasn't overly happy with how it turned out, but no need to panic. We can always make it work. So for the other cards, I did do some extra stamping, but I used some other stamps, and I made sure I only used the 2nd generation stamp. Okay, so next up is the yarn. So how are we going to incorporate yarn on this card? And I have to be honest, I don't own much yarn, and I had to look up the difference between yarn and string, and it really comes down to the thickness of it. So yarn's much thicker, and I thought it'd be really nice to try and thread it through some of the buttons. But the trouble is, how do you get that thick edge through the buttonhole? So my trick is to use some tape and fold it over the edge, the fluffy edge of that yarn, and trim it down to make this pointy end. So you create like a little triangle out of the sticky tape, and the fine point there, you can really easily thread through whatever it is you're trying to get that string or yarn through. So that's what I usually find works really well. and then I just tie it onto the button. I wasn't sure what way I wanted to position it on the flower, but I played around and thought it looked too messy the first way. So when I flipped it over, I thought this looked so much neater and really liked the way that looks. So that's another one ticked off. Now we've got quite a lot to fit into this card, so I don't know what was more challenging, fitting it all onto the card or fitting it all into this video. But the next one I'm tackling is ripped paper. Now I thought I'll use this old cardboard that I had, and yes, as soon as there's paper that can be ripped or chewed, my cat Ollie's come to visit. And I just thought I really like the rustic look. It gives a bit of a mixed media look as well. And to tie in the black ink that we've stamped on to the card, I thought I'd also do some ink blending around the edge as well. Okay, so there's really one element left and then assembling the card, and that's the glossy element, which we sort of already have included, but I'm going to add just a bit of a embossed sentiment onto the card as well, which will be nice and glossy. And so to create that, I'll be using the Close to My Heart stamp set Balloon Talk, and I'll be using black pigment ink with clear embossing powder. And just before I stamp, I'll go over the paper with my embossing buddy, and this is one that I've created at home myself, and I'll provide a link to that video in case you're interested in creating your own as well there for you to watch. If you like this video, I'd absolutely love your support to hit the like and subscribe button to see future videos. And let me know in the comments what you think about this card. And if you would like to also participate in creating a card with these parameters, please use the hashtag #SpringyCardChallenge because Rebecca and I really want to see what you create. Okay, so now that we've created all our elements we need for all the parameters of this card, it's time to assemble it together. And so that's always the fun part of playing around with how we want it all to stick together. And I've created a few of these cards. They're all slightly different but with the same style and elements, which makes it really easy to make a couple of cards at the same time but still have their unique differences. And in the end, I have decided to add in a few of those wooden embellishments as well, which I absolutely love. In the end, I've used all the parameters, and I've used Glossy twice, once on the leaves with the embossed paper and once on the sentiment with the clear embossing on top. I've used 4 new items, so that's the card base. I've also used the wooden embellishments, the stamp set on the background there with the love hearts and the leaves which of the dies. So 4 new items, and pattern paper I've also used twice, once on the green leaves and once with the flowers. So I think we've ticked everything off very well, and I've got a couple of bonus points I'm giving myself here, and all the other parameters that were used once as well, which includes the ripped paper and the yarn. We've used our stenciling and lots of ink blending too, actually. Numerous times we did some ink blending. So overall, I think it was very much a success. And then these are the other cards that I've created as well. And you can see on this card with the stamping that I did in the background, I just used a different stamp set and did the second generation stamping. So the first stamp I did onto scrap paper, and the second stamp I did on the card, and that way it was a bit lighter. So I was a bit happier with the way that turned out. And I'm not quite sure which one's my favorite, but I would love to know which one your favorite is out of all these cards, as well as which is your favorite parameter. For me, my favorite parameter is probably stenciling, as I just love using stenciling in numerous different ways. And I think this one would be my favorite card in the end, but hard to pick. I have a few favorites. Don't forget to head over and see what Rebecca's created. I'm super excited and I haven't seen what she's created. Her channel is Paper Crafting with Rebecca, and she also has some other fantastic videos that you just need to check out. And remember, the links in my description box below as well. Thank you so much for watching today, especially if you made it through the whole video, which was quite a full-on video today, and I can't wait to see you next time. In the meantime, have fun crafting. Bye!